Right now, good news for Republicans. The elephant's foot has healed after they shot themselves there with a government shutdown. But can they avoid putting this poll lead at risk with the decisions that will come next? And then, lawmaker, advocate, and rape survivor want to know why playing politics with abortion and a woman's right to choose is asking for trouble in 2013? Well, this woman will tell you in her own very personal words why that's just the case. And later, why the war on Christmas feels more like a war on my eardrums as well as all our intelligence. Oh, and if someone asks you what color Santa Claus is, here's a hint. Say nothing. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Tuesday evening, December 17th. We start tonight with a political note to Republicans. Make this soundbite your ringtone so you can hear it 25 times a day.
The day before the government reopened, one of the people at one of these groups stood up and said, well, we never really thought it would work. Are you kidding me?
Speaker Boehner there, of course, in what many hoped was a turning point last week when he took the Tea Party and the groups that backed the Tea Party to the proverbial woodshed for their role in the government shutdown and debt crisis back in October. Back then, many thought the GOP might stay in the outhouse through the 2014 midterms, but there's some new poll numbers out that say this is good news for the Grand Old Party. If that is, they know how to take advantage of what the numbers actually say. And for more, I want to bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. There's a lot at play here. Obviously, Obamacare, a big part of it, but nonetheless, this is good news Republicans have had in a while.
Though the real question here with these numbers may be, Rich, how did they come about? From the GOP doing something right or from a couple of terrible months polling-wise for President Obama? The president still at record-high disapproval ratings, according to ABC News and the Washington Post. 55% against him. That is now 2 months in a row his record high. But it's in questions of trust where Republicans really must be smiling tonight. Who do you trust to best handle spending versus cuts? Republicans by 8 points. Who do you trust to handle the nation's main problems overall? A tie, 41-41, but Republicans may be wise to change tactics on Obamacare. The program now just at a -3, 49% opposed, 46 support, but that now appears to be trending away from the GOP. So the question is, will the GOP follow the lead of Speaker Boehner and those numbers and nudge the party closer to the center, especially as the calendar turns to 2014, a midterm election year? Those choices begin right now. Expanded unemployment benefits on the table and set to expire just after Christmas. What will the GOP do? Food stamps, part of the Farm Bill currently under debate. Some Republicans calling for $40 billion in cuts to those in need. Immigration reform seemingly off the table, but if complete reform is not possible, deals might be in pieces. And Democrats will likely press for a raise in the minimum wage in the coming months, another issue where how Republicans voice their opposition may be as important as if they oppose it. And one final issue, mid-March we approach the debt limit again. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell already saying the GOP will want something in exchange for avoiding a default. So that high-stakes game of chicken that we saw in October, Rich, could be back around again in March.
And in many ways, it's interesting because McConnell, one of 8 Republicans in the Senate who voted against the most recent deal because he's up for re-election. Yep. And those Republicans who are petrified still of the right here, a lot has to do with if they're up for keeping their job or not this November. All right, let's bring in our panel right now here. And for one of the brightest in the Grand Old Party, GOP strategist Jessica Proud with us here. And alongside her, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Andrew, who you met. Okay, Jessica, these numbers, we see how much they can fluctuate and stuff, but can Republicans handle prosperity? Or are they going to do something like they do seemingly every time, which is overplay their hand, have an inter-party fight here or whatever else? When you heard Boehner say what he did you say hallelujah or tread carefully?
Yeah, I mean, you always want to tread carefully because it's not so much about alienating those groups, but it's just about bringing them into a bigger tent, making them feel like they're happy and satisfied, not causing huge primary fights.
But can you really do that? He's tried so hard until he finally said no.
Everyone is united around a cause right now, which is Obamacare. So it's, you know, it's good to see them being on offense. I think they are very aware of this precarious situation they're in right now. I don't think you're going to see them tackle some of these controversial issues like immigration reform. I think they're going to keep the focus on Obamacare, keep that pressure on, and not try to deviate
for the last
too much
5 years,
from that.
every time they've been in a situation where they could avoid a fight, they don't. They
Well,
always pick
look,
it.
it's going to be, the president has to have some movement with this. This is going to be his legacy. This is going to consume his entire second term. It's going to be a huge factor in the midterm elections. So it's good for the Republicans to stay on it, and the Democrats are going to want to fix it and change public opinion on it.
They're going to be forced to make a couple of choices. Unemployment extension, as Andrew said here, it's coming up. Now, it's not, for so many people, it's not just, an inner city hood issue now. The amount of people who need unemployment and whose 26 weeks are up right now are in a lot of these districts too. So if they say at the end of the day they pulled the plug, it's not always the same traditional communities where we've always talked about this. They're going to get blamed if they get no. And already the Rand Pauls of the world said, we're going to be doing you a favor if we cut you off.
Well, it depends on how they,
Isn't it yes or
how
no?
they tackle the debate. And I think a big part of it is the fact that the economy is still suffering under this president. And that remains to be seen of who ends up getting blamed for it. But they have a real opportunity to keep on offense going into the elections.
If they go with a draconian cut as leaving unemployment at 26 weeks, Republicans will be blamed for it.
And they should, or be praised for it, depending on how people feel about the vote. But I don't think it's one of those they can completely avoid because the deadlines are coming up. And at the end of the day, they're going to have to say yes or no on a few things. I'm curious, Dominic, I was surprised by the numbers only in that I knew the president had taken a big hit. We've seen polls before on the rollout of Obamacare, and understandably so. But I haven't seen some fiscal wizardry here by the Republican Party either. And historically, is this more of an indictment, I guess, of the president rather than looking across the aisle and say we trust these guys more?
Yes, it's more of an indictment on this president. This president was doing pretty good, but this administration, whoever the blame may belong with, but he's the president, really took a hit over this Obamacare rollout.
Okay, there's two questions, though.
And I don't know
I've
if he
heard
can
two different
recover.
schools of thought. One is that, hey, listen, this has always been no drama Obama, and there's competency with this president, okay? Maybe he hasn't got done as much as people thought, but at the end of the day, he's competent. That took a major hit. The other one, and I hear this more and more, I'm surprised by it, but his thing that, hey, you can keep your own doctor, the trustworthiness that he had. Nobody ever thought that he was shady or whatever else. People are attributing here the trust aspect that you can't trust what he says. They've been waiting for it maybe more than other presidents, but nonetheless, when he said that, that fed some of, let's say, the circumspect folks out there who said, see, I told you can't trust him. Which one do you think hurt more?
You are correct, though. Roll it all into one. I don't really think it's a matter of either or. It's you put it all together, and it's very bad for this president. On my way in, I was listening to some of the talk shows, and they are saying, now, yes, there's still plenty of time, but if it continues along this path, this president can leave office with the same low approval ratings as President Bush did.
Lower than Bush was at this point. And historically, if you look at polls, it's very hard to recover once you've reached this low
Andrew, I
point.
asked that too. Ron Fournier, who we both read, right? It was good. But he laid out that if this president doesn't want to suffer the same fate as a lot of other second-term presidents, and let's put a little context. George W. Bush had on his second term here more of the expose about Iraq, certainly why we went in, certain Katrina. You put Obamacare in context with a rollout of a program, and embarrassing that it is, there is some context. That said, though, Andrew, he said this is the end if he doesn't do something, and he's tinkering on the edges. If you look at the people he surrounds himself with, he's really not acting like many people said with the necessary panic like Bill Clinton did when he came with a bunch of new blood, changed policies, changed approach.
Slow down. First of all, Ron Fournier is playing on Jessica's team, so let's not consider him an arbiter of being a centrist or down the middle. Second of all, the argument there from somebody who wants a movement to the right is, well, that's what Clinton did. Clinton wanted to get to the deal and was willing to make a deal no matter what it took. to basically keep things going in his administration. Obama's not going to give up his principle. At least I don't think he is. He's not going to give up his political positioning just to make a deal, just to make his numbers go up.
But the
he's
math though says
he's going to stick to what he wants to stick to.
Look at his calendar and look what you laid out, okay? His big picture agendas, and he, like every other person who sat in that office that's nice and oval, cares about legacy and what they're going to do. He knows when lame duck kicks in, and he says, geez, this thing goes south on me. He's got to play the metric. Hold on. He's got to play the metric. You don't want to alienate the Democrats here that are running for re-election. And right now he's seen as a drag, not a help in a lot of places. And at the same time, he doesn't want to get nothing done. He's got to figure out something other than saying no on principle.
I mean, he wants to get more than nothing done, but he hasn't really had the partners to do that already for 4 years now, since the 2010 midterm elections. That's not going to change. The only way that changes for President Obama is if somehow Democrats are able to keep the Senate and win the House in the midterm election. So he needs.
You sound like you're with Jessica here, that he's going to have a tough time for the rest of his term.
He's going to. If the status quo stays as it is right now, with one branch being Republican and one branch being Democratic, he gets nothing done. I think everybody at the table would agree with that.
Republicans have made sure that this president is not going to succeed. They have put all eggs in the basket to make sure that this president fails.
They didn't roll out his health care plan. That's all him and his friends.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, exactly. We were the only ones speaking out against it to begin with. But he's never been particularly interested in negotiating anything with Congress. It's just not his style.
We can go round and around on that one for all night long. Okay. When we switch gears here, we're going to go to, of all places, the state legislature in Michigan. Now, the abortion certainly could be a third-rail issue for the GOP, and I'll give you the latest example on that by what happened in Michigan. When we come back here, it's compelling video. You'll want to hear what this legislator had to say. Stay with us.